Adding default constraint in SQL Server. Hi, I'm M. Asif Hussain from KnowHow Academy. What are we going to learn in this video? We are going to learn what is meant by a default constraint, how to add a default constraint to an existing table in SQL Server. By the end of this video, you could able to learn and create and understand what exactly is a default constraint and how to create the default constraint to a table in SQL Server. So watch till the end. So my dear viewers, I have two tables here. One I have a product table and another one I have product sales table. So if I would like to execute these two, I have got the output where I have three columns in the product table called product ID, product name and product unit price. And I have product ID and product quantity sold in the product sales table. So if I would like to show it to you, under the Object Explorer, if you see the product table, so the product ID is a primary key and the product name is a varchar and the product unit price is an integer. Alright, so we have not null here. So now what I would like to do is, for instance, let us consider if I am adding a new column, or if I would not a new column, if I am adding a new row or I am inserting a new row in my particular table called product, and for example, if I am not inserting any record in the column called product unit price, then what are we going to get there? So obviously we are going to get null, N-U-L-L, null. It means empty. So there is no information in that particular cell. So now, rather than to have a null, to avoid those kind of null cells in a particular table, so if a customer is forgetting to insert some record into that particular cell or into that particular column, then by default there should be some value that should come in an output. So that's where we go with the default constraint. So how to do that? So for that, what I'm going to do, so first let me insert a record, insert into my table called product table. And what I'm inserting the values. So when I'm inserting the values, so let us consider the product ID number 5, comma, and the product name called mobile phone, which is Oppo. Okay. Now, as I have considered only two particular informations, one is product ID, another one is product name. So I would like to add the values to only these two columns. So for that, I'll specify the column name here. Let me consider it as a product ID column, comma, and the next column as product name column. All right. So now what I'm trying to do, so if I try to execute it, then cannot insert the value null into a column unit price. The reason is that it will not allow the null values. So if you see here, the product unit price is having not null. It's having not null. So it will not allow the null value. So let us consider that I am adding a value here. Okay. So now comma, and the product unit price, let us consider some random price. So if I execute it, it means that the value is getting inserted successfully, and if I retrieve the table, so we have the value coming out here. So the interesting concept here is that we have got the value. The reason is that I have inserted the value in it. Am I right? So now what I'm trying to do, if I would like to if I would like to create a constraint for the same product unit price, all right. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add a constraint. So to add a default constraint to an existing table, so the syntax is that alter table name, then we have to add the constraint, then the constraint name. Default is a constraint that I will be using here, and the default value that I would like to give it for which particular column, that column you have to specify it here. So for this, what I'm trying to do with the same syntax, let me go and create a default constraint for my particular column called product unit price. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I am using alter, then the table, my table name is product, Now for this product table, what I am doing, I am adding a constraint. So the constraint name, let us consider as it is a default constraint. DF is a short form I would like to take. Now for the which table? For the product table. So for which column? For product unit price column. So let us consider product unit price. So that is the name I am giving it. Okay, this is my constraint name. So now what I am doing, I am adding default here. I am adding default here. Now what is the default value I have to give? That you have to specify it. For example, if there is no record that we are entering it, so now what I would like to do, let me give 0. Okay, so for which particular column? For the existing column name such as unit price, which you would like to consider it now, product underscore unit price, product underscore unit price. So we have created this one. So now let us go and execute it. So if I execute it, commands completed successfully. So if we see here, so we have 5 records. There is nothing wrong in it. We have 5 records. Now what I'm going to do, I am inserting one more record. Okay, I'm inserting one more record. So now I'm not going to choose the unit price here, and let me consider some other product name such as lava. Okay, so for the 2 columns alone I would like to give it. So for example, the column called product ID, comma, and the second column called product name. For these 2 columns alone I would like to insert the value, but I'm not inserting it for which particular column? For the product unit price column. Or if you do not want to specify the column names here, it's up to you, it's your choice. For instance, let us go and see. Now if I try to execute it, there is an error. Column name or number of supplied values does not match the table definition. So my dear viewers, whenever you would like to see the result with only 2 values rather than having 3 values for 3 columns, you should always specify for which particular column you are inserting the values. As I told that if you want you can avoid mentioning the column name beside the table name. It's wrong, because the reason that I have told you this one, because I have to show you the result. I have to show you the error. So this error is very important for us. The reason is that many of we developers, what we generally do, if you are starting our career newly in SQL Server, what we generally do is that, okay, anyhow I have created a default constraint. When I am not giving any value, obviously I am going to get 0 there. That's what the value we have given it here. No, though you do not give, or though you give the default value, we should surely specify the column names here. So now when I'm trying to execute it, 1 row affected, as I did not give the product unit price for lava, so by default the value should come 0. We have got 0 here. Okay, so this is very important. And even there is one more question. So where can we find the constraint that we have created? So if I go to Object Explorer, and under this table we have constraint. So let me refresh this constraint. When I refreshed it, we can see that we have a default constraint that we have created just now. We have got this default constraint that we have created it just now. Now my dear viewers, okay, there is one more question. Okay, so now I have created a default constraint. Now I came to know that, okay, I should not have created this constraint here, so I have to remove it. Okay, I have to remove the constraint that I have created. So if you would like to remove, or if you would like to drop, or if you would like to delete that constraint, okay, so for that the syntax that we have is alter table name, drop constraint name, drop constraint name. So now let's go and follow this one. So what I'm trying to do, I'm just dropping the default constraint that I have created. So for this, what I'm doing, alter table, what is the table name? Product is my table name. So now what I am doing, I am dropping the constraint. So what is the constraint name? That I am just copying it from the constraint name that we have created it. So what I am doing, I am pasting it here. So now if I execute it, we can see that the commands completed successfully. Now let's check whether this particular constraint got dropped or not. So for this, what I'm doing, I'm coming to the Object Explorer. Okay, again I'm refreshing my constraint here. As you can see, now we don't have any constraint. So my dear viewers, having a default constraint for some columns depending upon the requirement is very important, or else it will be a big trouble for the developers who are working, because they might face many null values, many empty cells in the table. So we generally, customers, as a customer, if I think it, so customers what generally do, whether if they feel that this information is not required to fill up, they generally leave it. Am I right? They don't fill any information, they generally leave it. So whenever the customers are leaving these kind of informations in the backend part, we get null near that particular column for that particular cell. So to avoid that, we generally use the default constraint. So this is how you have to add a default constraint for an existing table or for an existing column in a table in SQL Server. So in this video, we have learned how to create a default constraint for a column in a table in SQL Server. We have seen what is a default constraint, and we have also learned how to drop a constraint in SQL Server. So thank you for choosing KnowHow Academy as your source for IT knowledge. We are always here to help you to navigate the tech world. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. It's been a pleasure sharing this information with you. Stay curious and keep learning.